Hi, this is Louis Barai once again with Movies That Move Us. With this entry in our series, I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this. I'm going to provide a running audio commentary on one of my favorite cartoons. It's one of the primordial cartoons in the career of Betty Boop. It's one of her first cartoons, Mysterious Mose, which was released in 1930. Directed by Dave Fleischer. The actual director of this cartoon is Willard Bowski. He's the first, I'll get to that in the commentary, but he's the first animator in the animation credits. And the way the Fleischer studio ran, they were the guys who actually did the actual directing of the cartoon. But more on that with our commentary. So I'm going to give you some nice little factoids about Betty, the star of our cartoon, and those who brought her to life in this cartoon. We'll see you then. Okay, let's start off with the soundtrack, which was composed by Manny Bayer. He started working in late teens at Paramount as a music composer, and well, he worked up until after World War II, and he chose to, while some composers would go to Hollywood to further their talents, Bayer remained in New York with the Fleischers, as I said, until after World War II. One of the scores he composed for them was the score to this cartoon. Bayer was born in 1886 and he died in 1970. One thing that he said about the Fleischers, they were a very inventive, crazy bunch of animators. Just, I mean, look at that. And, risque! Whoa! And we're listening right now to the voice of Margie Hines. She was born in 1909. And believe it or not, she's still with us. What do you know? The very first voice of Betty Boop. She was briefly married in the late 30s, the early 40s to Jack Mercer, who, if to you cartoon aficionados, you'll know him as the voice of Popeye the Sailor, the longest running voice of Popeye.
Take him off, we know you.
And Margie, as a matter of fact, was one of the very first people to voice Betty. She did so in one of the very first cartoons before handing over the role to Mae Questel. And she was also the voice of Olive Oyl after the Fleischers moved their studio from New York to Florida, and did so until 1944. The wonderfully inventive animation we're looking at right now well, he didn't receive credit for working on this cartoon, or did he receive credit for creating Betty in the first place. I'm speaking of Myron Grimm Natwick, who was born in 1890 in Wisconsin. He gained the nickname Grimm for his anything but grim attitude. He received that nickname while he was in high school. Natwick started in the teens working for J.R. Bray, and well, he gave some very famous people their starts in the business. Among them, his first assistants were Walter Lantz, who of course went on to create Woody Woodpecker. Another one of his assistants was Chuck Jones, who was his assistant when he was working at the Ub Iwerks studio in the early 30s. And last but not least, his assistant at Disney was Mark Davis, who went on to animate Sleeping Beauty. He animated the title character in Cinderella, and the villain in 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil. Some of his last credited animation was working with Richard Williams on The Thief and the Cobbler. like Margie Hines, he lived to a ripe old age. He died a few days after his 100th birthday in 1990 from a combination of pneumonia and a heart attack. Another animator who worked on this was Ted Sears. He was with the Fleischers in the early 1930s, late 20s. He was hired away by the Disney Studios in 1931, and he remained with Disney till his death in 1958. He worked on all of the great Disney features, his last one being Sleeping Beauty. And he was one of the people who invented storyboarding. And if you watch Peter Pan, he wrote the song What Makes the Red Man Red.
That's mysterious, Mose.
Last but not least is the de facto director of this cartoon, the first animator credited in the animation credits. And of course, I'm speaking now of Willard Bowski, born in 1907 and died in 1944. He started working at the Fleischers in the late 20s, and he started with Betty and switched over to Popeye the Sailor with Blow Me Down. He worked on their two features, Gulliver's Travels and Mr. Bug Goes to Town. He also worked on the Superman cartoons that were produced by that studio in the early 1940s. He joined the Army in World War II, in which he led the 94th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, and sadly he died in combat while in the Army. He received a Purple Heart and the Silver Star. Thanks for taking the time to watch this cartoon with me. We'll see you.